Hi, my question is for all of you, or whichever one wants to answer. In your experiences, do you feel like there's a willingness on the part of farmers to, or a ready willingness to change up the types of crops that they're growing, so they either require less irrigation or they're higher value, so they're making more bang for the buck, or more buck for the bang, I guess is a better way of asking.
Well, as an ag economist, I'll simply say that farmers are usually growing what they grow because it makes the most sense given their growing conditions, prices, and other incentives. So if you want them to switch, you need to find a way to make it worthwhile to them to think about that. It's rare that there's just this golden opportunity that nobody's thought of until a new person comes in for crops. Every once in a while you hear a story like that.
No, you're exactly right, and I mean the market drives a lot of this stuff. That's what's going to choose. That's what's going to drive them to making decisions. But my experience.
I will add, in the Verde, one of the things we are talking about is how do we move from some of the summer crops into winter crops, and that would have to be an incentive payment. So whether that's financially feasible in the long run is questionable. So, they're not going to grow lower value crops that grow in the winter and require less irrigation when corn's what's going to pay the bills.
So thank you, all of you. This has been really interesting. My question's for Bonnie. In 2001, you had some data. There was a huge blip in the number of transfers, and the category was other. And I'm just curious, what was that?
Oh, that's a good question. 2001 in the Colorado.
Ari, can you maybe flip back to that slide? Can you
2001 in the Colorado Basin. I'm thinking that might have been a big energy. Some new power plants coming on could account for part of that acquisition. And let's see.
One more.
That's by state, volume transferred. 2001, and I'm trying to remember what was happening in California where you have the biggest volume of water moving around in general. Do you remember? Was that
there was a water bank going on in Klamath, up north.
Well, small volumes, but it would show up. Oh,
like 75,000 acre-feet.
right, yep. And this scale is on the 3 million acre-feet per year. Yeah, so that'd be a blip in that. Yeah, that's a good question. I'd actually have to look back and see. I don't recall that it was a terrible drought year in the place where the highest volumes of water move, which are Arizona and California.
Bonnie, you're saying that the water is moving around in the form of leases. And could you say a little bit more about what a water lease is? Is it on an annual basis? What is the structure of a lease?
Okay, great question, Chris. So those take a variety of forms. It can be a growing season lease or a summer in which a pecan farmer realizes, wow, pecan prices are great. If I had a little more water, I could increase my yields beyond what my water entitlement would allow me to do. So that could be a lease for maybe even 4 to 6 weeks. That would fall under this category. We capped the definition of leases for this data at 10 years, but really most of them are under a year, and a lot of the environmental leases are for a season. Fish passage is really tight in this area. Our water temperatures are getting too warm for fish. We need a July season lease in which a high mountain pasture isn't watered so that the water stays in the stream and keeps the fish alive. Does that answer your question about leases? There's an immense variety. Yeah. And state law, of course, has to permit temporary water leasing, which most of the western states now do. Any other additions to water leasing?
Dan, I have a question for you. You showed an agreement. Does it go into the? Okay. Dan, I have a question for you. You showed agreement of the partners, and one of these is what is a water right, and it had withdrawal essentially from it rather than in-stream flow. So there was the Trout Unlimited and some other groups that I was surprised that they would come to agreement on that.
Well, yeah, I might want to show the entire.
I don't know how to get back to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, in the interim, Kim, how long are these contracts with the farmers? Are these 3, 5 year? And have you done projections out for long-term planning, 10 years?
Our contracts at this point have been short-term. Our current agreement with the Diamond S is 3 years. We're aiming to create the infrastructure through these payment systems so that we don't have to do this in the long run. We don't want to be paying someone to do something every year for the next 50 years. That's not a long-term solution. So our goal is to create the infrastructure that's needed, or to figure out how to do something permanent. In Arizona, we don't have leasing. We have a very hard time doing an in-stream flow transfer. There's applications that have been pending for more than 10 years. So our goal is to figure out how to do it. There are some ways to do it, but we've got to kind of work on those solutions. So we're aiming at creating long-term solutions using these short-term 1 to 3 year agreements in the interim.
I'll just talk about another. We're working on outside my activities with the Family Farm Alliance. We're working on a long-term on-project plan for the Klamath Irrigation Project right now, where we're trying to set up actually permanent agreements. It's going to take a lot of money up front, but basically, you get the money up front, and depending on certain hydrologic conditions at a certain time of the year, farmer would agree to not irrigate a portion of his property, or maybe pump groundwater in place of surface water. And I actually think there's application for that for Colorado River Basin too. So I'm not sure I understood your question, but I think what we agreed on a definition. So.
It's to be diverted, and so that typically that would mean taking it out of the stream.
Right. Well, again, I think, and in this, it took us like a year. It took us like a year to reach agreement, and primarily it was on the water rights language. But you're just saying, how come there's not something in there relative to like an in-stream use? Yeah. I don't know. I mean, we drafted something up. We gave it to the environmental groups, and Nature Conservancy took forever to get back to us. but they did agree. But I'm sorry I'm not really answering your question.
I think one of the things we thought about that was, in most cases, 99% of the cases, a water right is diverted. There's not a lot of in-stream flow rights. So to try to capture that concept in wording was a little difficult. And also recognizing that when you do have an in-stream water right, it typically has a point of diversion. It has a point where it starts. And so just because it doesn't come out of the stream, that is described on that certificate as the place that it starts. So from my perspective, when I read that, there were far more things in there to worry about whether or not it said diverted. Because it does have a point of diversion, it has a start of the reach, and that's what that describes.
Well, one more question, and I think we're running into lunch here.
Dan, you mentioned the use of the AWEP program. As you know, that's gone away.
Yeah.
On it, there's a new program, the regional.
RCCP.
Yeah. And it's got somewhat, I've read it, and it looks to me it appears to have much broader scope. It includes both land and water on it. It's broader in terms of its stakeholders, and the projects that are described or funded actually depend upon what the stakeholders in a water basin and it can be a watershed, a state, or multi-state areas. What do you anticipate any increased role for that in terms of the future for water conservation?
Yeah, no, I mean, we like it. One thing that this new Farm Bill did is it took a lot of tons of alphabet soup conservation programs and consolidated them. And RCCP, I think there's like 4 or 5 different programs rolled into it. It's AWEP, it's the Chesapeake Bay stuff, Great Lakes. So far, and they're just starting to roll this out, as you know, in the last month or so, the Secretary has rolled it out. We like it because it is so broad. And, we were talking about this before our call. I mean, there's certain parts of the West, if they get designated as critical conservation area, which the Colorado River Basin is, could really benefit from it. Our coalition so far has been very supportive of this program, and we've been trying to encourage some of our members to take advantage or politically push for the designation of the critical conservation areas. Some folks wanted to, some folks didn't want to. You know, especially with my constituency, there's kind of a suspicion sometimes of federal government programs. And especially in Colorado, we've had some difficulty kind of getting some of the commodity groups on board. But overall, I think the philosophy that's come out of not only the bill language, but how it's being implemented and rolled out by the Secretary has been encouraging for the coalition.
All right, I think we'll have to end the session on this. Please join me in thanking each of our speakers.